The chair recognizes a gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, here is a quote from a Newsweek article. Quote, "There are ominous signs that the Earth's weather patterns have begun to change dramatically, and that these changes may portend a drastic decline in food production, with serious political implications for about every nation on Earth. The drop in food output could begin quite soon, perhaps only 10 years from now." My colleagues, Newsweek published this dire warning in its April 28, 1975 issue, years before global warming began getting the headlines it does today. Did Newsweek accurately forecast the coming of global warming more than 30 years ago? The article entitled, quote, "The Cooling World," end quote, warned that the Earth's climate seemed to be cooling to the point that populations around the world are in imminent danger because of the coming ice age. Newsweek was not the only publication to warn about the supposed threat of global cooling during the 1970s. In an article entitled "Another Ice Age" on June 24, 1974, the issue of Times reported, end quote, "When meteorologists take an average of temperature around the globe, they find that the atmosphere has been growing gradually cooler for the past 3 decades. And Times article did not predict a break in this decade-long cooling trend. The article continued to warn that, quote, "telltale signs were everywhere," end quote, from the unexpected persistence and thickness of packed ice in the waters around Iceland to the southward migration of warm-loving creatures like the armadillo from the Midwest. Fortune magazine also gave warning. A February 1974 article entitled "Ominous Changes in the World's Weather" claimed that, quote, "There's a fair agreement among researchers that the Earth is now heading very slowly into another major ice age, such as the one that brought the glaciers deep into North America before it retreated some 10,000 years ago." This article also pointed to the supposedly unusual weather patterns of the day as indication of much worse weather to come. Climatologists now blame those reoccurring droughts and floods on a global cooling trend. It could bring massive tragedies for mankind, the article went on to say. These days, of course, we no longer hear much, if anything, about the possibility of runaway global cooling triggering another ice age. Instead, we hear a lot about the threat of catastrophic global warming. Now, what happened? Well, the temperature trend changed. After dropping for about 35 years, the temperature started to rise in the mid-70s. Although the global temperature now is only slightly higher than it was in the 1940s when the cooling trend began. Over the centuries and millennia, the weather has changed at times radically. During the 10th century, the Vikings established prosperous colonies in Greenland, having named the island for its lush pastures. By the early 15th century, however, these were wiped out by cold and hunger, and now 4/5 of Greenland lies buried under the hundreds of feet of ice cap. No one blamed human activity for this climate shift or the ice age. But in the 70s, some experts argue that human impact on their environment had grown to the point where their atmospheric pollutants were contributing significantly to global warming, global cooling rather, just as some experts argue today that CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions are causing global warming today. Climatologists suggest that the dust and other particles released into the atmosphere as a result of farming and the burning of fossil fuels were blocking more and more sunlight from reaching and heating the surface of the Earth. They projected that man's potential to pollute would increase 6 to 8-fold over the next 50 years. And as Reed Bryson stated in Fortune in February 1974, quote, "It is something that, if it continues, will affect the whole human occupation of the Earth, like 1 billion people starving," end quote. Another of the concerned scientists was Dr. Stephen Schneider, the co-author of the Science Report, who in the 70s was worried about the threat of global cooling. Now at Stanford University, Dr. Schneider not only sees things differently, but is considered one of the leading experts now sounding the alarm about global warming. In a recent MSNBC report, Dr. Schneider argued that today's warming trend, quote, has been induced by humans using the atmosphere as a free place to dump our tailpipe waste, quote. However, not everyone sounded the alarm about global cooling in the 70s, just like not everyone is sounding the alarm about global warming today. Madam Speaker, the fact that so many experts were wrong about global cooling in the 70s does not necessarily mean that they are wrong about global warming today, but it does at least show that experts are sometimes incredibly wrong. I yield back.